Here is my experience with anabolic steroids and how I want to use it to help other people. For the last year, I have let my scars shatter my self-esteem and cripple me with anxiety and depression. So 2 days ago, I downloaded TikTok and made this page to provide solid fitness advice, raise awareness for anabolic steroids, and improve my own self-confidence along the way.
What's up guys, Derek, moreplaysmartates.com. Today we're going to be reacting to Dave Hartree. This was a viral post that I was tagged in by a ton of you guys, and it is about the age-old concern about anabolics and the prevalence of acne. This was a pretty ruthless before and after. He had pretty clear skin in the beginning. Here's him in 2017, super clean, and then moving to current, my experience with anabolics.
Steroids and how I want to use it to help other people. For the last year, I have let my scars shatter my self-esteem and cripple me with anxiety and depression. So 2 days ago, I downloaded TikTok and made this page to provide solid fitness advice, raise awareness for anabolic steroids, and improve my own self-confidence along the way. 1 year ago, I decided to stop taking steroids. When I took them, I got acne that was so bad that dermatologists and doctors described it as something like they've never seen before. This acne was not like normal spots. It used to come up like a boil, and when that boil popped, it used to leave open wounds on my back, chest and face. Now imagine you have these open wounds on your back. Every time you sit in a chair, drive a car, go to sleep, go to the gym to train, lie on the couch, what you're doing is you're pressing your back against your clothes or material, and then what's happening is every time you sit up, you're ripping all those cuts open, which is making them bigger and taking longer to recover. Unfortunately, this could happen to anyone. Some people have the genetics to get away with taking steroids and some people don't. It's as simple as that. I've worked with some of the top coaches in the industry and coached hundreds of people myself. Believe me when I say this, there is more benefit to be taken from learning how to train properly and eat properly than taking steroids when you don't know what you're doing. If you are considering taking anabolic steroids, please consider the consequences, do your research, and hire an educated coach to guide you along the way. Think twice before rolling the dice with your health.
Yeah, so that is a pretty bad one, and we've seen some pretty ruthless before and afters on the channel. This one, he's prone to acne, took anabolics, is what happened. He also cut his nipples off in Mexico. Yes, quite the title. He had never had acne, took gear, this is what happened. Pretty ruthless before and after. Severe acne from anabolic use, I'm pretty sure this was case report in the literature. This before and after, really, really rough. You can see it here on the right side, or let me blow it up here for you. Boom, huge. This is, how do you even describe that? Just ruthless, dude. This was steroids ruined his body. This was another individual, Zan Carver, who posted a educational before and after, kind of exemplifying the same thing, you know, things he wishes he knew beforehand, and his really, really ruthless experience and what it did to his self-esteem, if he regrets it, you know, things he wishes he knew beforehand, etc. And when it comes to Dave Hartree, when he mentioned, you know, make sure you're educated before you use gear, and this is something that could happen to anyone, he's 100% on point. This before image looks pretty clean. There's no visual acne on the chest. You know, obviously it's a zoomed out kind of potato quality image, but at the end of the day, this is a pretty clean looking torso, and then it ends up completely decimated by acne. And this is something that is very difficult to predict, because you could be somebody who at baseline had essentially, you know, prime skin, prime real estate that you think is gonna, you know, remain unscathed, and then all of a sudden you start, you know, messing with your hormones, suppressing them, fluctuating them, exogenously administering massive quantities of them, whatever it is. There are so many ways acne can flare up. It's not just about an influx of androgens, it's also the deprivation of them and fluctuation of hormones in your body itself. And this is why a lot of guys actually get their worst breakouts during a post-cyclotherapy phase, when they're actually clearing the hormones out of their system. The worst breakouts I ever had personally were way back in the day when I would be doing a cycle and then cycle off, and then the PCT thereafter. The worst breakout would come mid-PCT every single time. And for Dave, this is not something that, you know, is simply fixable via, you know, oh, use your Proactive. Like, oh, you should have changed your pillowcase. Oh, you should have, you know, showered more frequently, or used a some sort of scrub or this or that, and it's obviously, self-induced, and you just don't know how to manage the side effects, bro. No, with anabolics, if you are a brutal responder from an acne aspect, short of taking a fat dose of Accutane for months on end, there is really not a lot you can do to prevent this from happening. Sure, you can attenuate it to some extent, but when it's this dramatic, there really is no preventing it at all. Like, you could take hepatotoxic, potentially life-altering in some cases Accutane. Fortunately for me, Accutane was a pretty benign drug, and to date, this manifestation of side effects that have occurred long-standing for me is essentially perpetually dry skin from sebaceous gland oil production being permanently reduced. But some people actually have problematic long-standing issues from Accutane use, and it's also a drug that has side effects associated with it. It's not risk-free. It's not just, a pill you pop and it gets rid of your acne. You can use gear willy-nilly. It also has its own issues. So these are all things to be mindful of. Is you could be that guy. He is an outlier for sure. The probability that you're going to get this bad of acne, especially if your baseline was totally clean, very, very low. However, I'm sure you personally know a lot of guys who blew up with acne when they use gear. There's always, typically a guy in a circle of fitness enthusiasts who are enhanced. That one guy seems to have no cosmetic side effects, but then he has blood pressure issues, or he has something internally that's problematic. His kidneys get stressed like way easier than the next guy, or hepatotoxicity problems, or this or that, versus the next guy is super tolerable of the drugs, but then cosmetically he has the manifestation of brutal hair loss, or brutal acne breakout. Like, it seems like everyone has one thing or another that goes awry. And ultimately, one of the things that makes a high tier bodybuilder is not just their genetic response to the gear from a muscle building aspect, but it's also their tolerability of the side effects. Some guys, they can barely handle higher than a TRT dose without getting gynecomastia development. There's a reason why I mentioned the proactive saving of funds to afford a gyno surgery right as you get into serious bodybuilding. It's like a real, smart strategy, because there's a potential probability that you end up with that, and then your selection of compounds ends up being suboptimal, given that you're constantly trying to mitigate gyno flaring, and doing that with SERMs, AIs, drugs that may not be as conducive to cardiovascular health or the prevention of cardiovascular disease, attenuating it, because some drugs can be worse than others. That kind of thing is not something you want to deal with. But when it comes to acne, there are certain practices you can deploy for sure. Administration frequency to prevent massive spikes and fluctuations in hormones. Obviously, Accutane is a very potent medication prescribed by dermatologists that actually does work very, very well. But that's like the hyper extreme nuclear approach for mitigating acne too, that you ideally don't want to be using that at all either. Like, the more drugs in your system, if you don't need them, it's the less drugs the better at the end of the day. So if you can get away with attenuating it through managing frequency of administration, actual straight up over the counter stuff that aren't drug related, or even topical applications of certain drugs, like using a tretinoin or something. I don't even remember if it's clinically indicated for acne prevention or mitigation, but topical anti-androgen, I believe, was just approved. Class Codrone, I believe. The CB0301 topical anti-androgen is being researched for hair loss prevention. Also is now approved as Breezula, is the commercial name, I believe, for, can't recall off the top of my head, but it is, the actual chemical is the same one. Breezula versus, the name is escaping me, but CB0301 is approved by the FDA as a topical anti-androgen for acne prevention, from what I know last I checked. There are a bunch of different ways to manage acne from a risk mitigation standpoint, attenuation standpoint, but again, at the end of the day, short of Accutane, this kind of an outcome, if you're that guy, if you're the hyper extreme outlier, it's a position that you just have to accept you may end up in if you go down this route. Now, again, other mitigation strategies you could look at, what if you did something that's in and out of your system faster? Would that then justify the usage of a shorter ester, like a propionate, or potentially even doing like a Anavar only beginner cycle, like Mike Israel has talked about? Up for interpretation at the end of the day. That is not something I would be, I think eventually, if anybody is serious about anabolics and, you know, like high tier use, they are going to eventually be graduating to injectables in some capacity. It's entirely possible that you just, you know, stick with random like short oral bursts if you're a, you know, specific applications are, you know, tailored for actual sports or athletics, or you just have, you know, want a low barrier to entry, like reasonably user-friendly, idiot-proofed way to go about it. You know, maybe you could get away with less of a breakout if you didn't shut yourself down, use exogenous testosterone, push your DHT levels into the fucking, you know, super physiological territory concurrently with your estrogen and test. But you're still going to encounter some issues. So it's, again, like at the end of the day, these are things to be mindful of. You might end up being that guy, and it's a realistic outcome that happens to some unfortunate individuals. But again, you know, could be a blessing in disguise. He's now here, you know, educating people on harm prevention, risk mitigation, you know, actual, you know, normal, natural fitness advice, stuff like that. He mentions here why he will not discuss his cycle. My situation is rare. Why did I stop? Maybe we should get into some of those and get some more context here.
Always a few people, but no, I do not. My life was on a completely different path at the time, and I needed to go through that to become the person I am today. Each person's problems are individual to them, with a specific purpose to help them learn and grow. My choices brought me to this point in my life, and all I can do from here is learn from my mistakes and try and make better choices in the future. And I am so grateful for the people in my life who helped me come out of that situation a better person.
Nice. That's a very enlightened take, I guess. I don't really know how to define that, but that's like optimistic about the situation for sure, because some people could just be entirely regretful and think that, wow, I just like disfigured myself and I have all these scars now. Obviously, it gets better if you're not actively using this stuff anymore and exacerbating it. It's going to, you know, some of these scars are going to fade a bit, and there are ways to kind of like improve the cosmetic appearance of them. But ultimately, there will be some like permanency of a visual representation of your previous use, unfortunately. And again, something to consider that, like for him, he's in a unique position where he has like an educational moment to be taken from this. A lot are not going to be the one who goes out on a limb like Zan Carver, who's, you know, willing to show this wild before and after that's absolutely ruthless, and how it, you know, ruined his body, and use it as an educational moment for other individuals. You know, there are a lot of people that aren't on social media that this stuff happens to too. And this is definitely a very optimistic take on the situation, and kudos to him for actually seeing it from this perspective. Why did I not stop? Let's see.
So anyone who takes bodybuilding seriously, or knows someone who takes bodybuilding seriously, will know how much work and effort goes into it. You're literally tracking stuff from the second you wake up to when you go to sleep, and then you're tracking your sleep as well. When I decided to pull the plug, I was 9 weeks out from my first bodybuilding show, and I've been working for over 3 years, all year round, leading up to that one show. I had just come back from a 7-week trip over to the UK, where I went over to train with my coach, who was a professional bodybuilder in the best bodybuilding gym in the UK. So this was a dream come true for me. I was absolutely tunnel vision for these shows, but about 4 weeks after I got back, I decided to assess the situation and decided to step away, which was one of the hardest but best decisions I've ever made. So anyone who takes bodybuilding seriously, or knows someone who takes bodybuilding seriously, will know how much work and effort goes into it.
The wild thing is how much progress you might see too from the anabolics, but at the same time, you like paradoxically want to take off your shirt even less, because you end up with, if you're prone to this, you know, like brutal acne that is, you know, visually, you know, embarrassing, or you feel, you know, your self-esteem is hit because your physique is, you know, the physical manifestation of anabolic side effects, essentially. Like, people know exactly what you're doing when you have a back like that, essentially. So like, I understand where his head was at for sure. Like, if you grinded that far into a prep and you want to see it through, fucking shitty how. And like, frankly, even if he did stop like right when he saw the first boil, like, yeah, he could have avoided it getting as bad as it did for sure. But I mean, like, there are, again, like I mentioned, like the brutal breakout that can come from even your PCT phase. It's unfortunate, and again, you might be putting yourself into a bit of a hole when you start this stuff. You dig yourself a little bit of a hole that you then have to climb out of while you are restoring normal endogenous hormone patterns and, you know, reaching a homeostasis that then lets the acne flaring, you know, settle down a bit. But like, even during the deprivation of hormones phase, where you were trying to pull everything out of your system, like that fluctuation in itself also exacerbates things even worse, which makes it even more problematic and scary, because it's not like you can just expect, oh, cold turkey, I cut this shit and then it doesn't get worse. Like, it may get worse even when you're not on the fucking hormone anymore, or at least actively pinning it. You get spots at the beginning and they're manageable. When you stop, spots can come on worse as well. Usually to the middle of your course is when. Was your E2 was in a range with AI, Primo, or EQ? Did you take Accutane? How did you start your first cycle with 400 or 500 milligrams of T? Did you figure out start your first cycle with 400 or 500 mgs to figure out how you'd respond? Do you listen to any of his videos before asking any of these questions? Gearheads talk about Accutane like you can pop into your local pharmacy and buy it like paracetamol. Yeah, like again, like Accutane is actually a pretty toxic drug, and getting it prescribed, like I'm sure this guy was, you know, definitely qualified, but I mean, some people, like if he was prepping for a show too, again, I have no context above and beyond what you guys have seen too, but like if you're mindful of health too, like what a paradoxical situation if you're prepping for a show and you're using like DHT derivatives and orals to, you know, like harden up or dry up or whatever it is, and you're worried about liver toxicity, and then you're thinking about, can I take my Accutane? Can I take Accutane on top of these liver toxic orals? And then you probably forego the Accutane to then use the anabolics you're going to step on stage with to achieve your cosmetic dryness and graininess and whatever. Like, it's a rough spot, man. He's not disclosing his steroid cycle with a reason not to encourage. In my opinion, useless approach has the opposite result. I don't know, everyone's going to have their own opinion in the comment section, of course, and ultimately you can't help but, you know, feel for this guy's situation. It's you know, an unfortunate one that many of us, especially who have been enhanced or currently enhanced or whatever, you know, would be fucking terrified to be in that spot. And the fact that he's spinning it in a positive light is definitely, I don't know, something that can be commended. Let's see, my situation is rare. I agree. I'm sure he's just going to say that he's seen tons of people use gear and the probability that it's this bad is extremely low. I agree with that. My skin when I took steroids versus 1 year after. Let's see.
My skin when I took steroids versus 1 year after stopping.
I'm going to take the music off because of the copyright, of course. So much bloat reduced, man. It's crazy how much people will hold just like fullness in their face when they're on. Like even if you're lean too, like the difference in just like actual amount of tissue you're holding, lean tissue, and the amount of glycogen and everything you can store. Everything just systemically, even in your face, if that's even the correct verbiage, I guess it's not systemically necessarily, but just like in your goddamn, the face tissue and the muscle surrounding it too, like everything is just bigger when you are more muscular, especially on anabolics. So anyways, yeah, like it's definitely improved. So kudos to him for that. He definitely looks healthier overall. And I imagine the majority of people would say that in general, he just looks like has massively improved overall since stopping. And what else does he say? Accutane. What is it? Does it work? I guess we're gonna hear now if he did end up using it.
Or raw Accutane is a medication prescribed by dermatologists in very severe cases of acne. It would usually be the last resort as the side effects can be very extreme. What this essentially does is dries your body out, so the side effects can be quite uncomfortable. If you think dry eyes, dry nose, sore throat, chapped lips, pretty much all the time, you're very sensitive to sunlight, and another side effect is also suicidal thoughts.
Yeah, so that's the thing is, and I can see in the comment section now, like what you said is right. However, you definitely made the sides seem more extreme than they are. Most will experience the dryness sides only. I got the dryness sides. But one thing to note is they're perpetual forever. Like my sebaceous glands like permanently produce less oil than they used to, and my lips too. They're fucking perma-chapped, bro. Like they never used to be like that, and that is something that you will deal with probably for the rest of your life if you have used well, I can't say that for certain, but at least for a long time, presumably. Like I'm pretty sure it causes like literal cell apoptosis of the whatever it is that is in the sebaceous, like I don't know the actual transcriptional like cascade of events that leads to oil production from a biological perspective, but whatever that sequence is where Accutane interferes with, it literally causes like permanency of loss to the ability to produce that oil. So this affects many different things above and beyond just, you know, preventing acne formation. And some people do seem to have permanency of, like when he said suicidal thoughts, if you look it up, you know, it's almost like post-finasteride syndrome. It seems like there is a very rare but potentially real occurrence of like really bad side effects from a mental standpoint in some individuals.
On top of this, it is extremely harsh on your liver as well, which is why it will be a dermatologist's last resort. However, it is an extremely effective form of medication for acne, and I have spoken to so many people who said it literally changed their lives. I've ran 2 different courses of Accutane, and while it was extremely effective, it was also very, very intense with the side effects. If you've never heard of it, it might be something to look into, but it's definitely not a quick fix.
Yeah, so I would have been shocked if he got this much reversal from not taking Accutane, so I'm not surprised to hear that he did take it. And for me personally, like my back, for context, it was never even close to this, but it was bad enough that I was, looking for solutions, and Accutane seemed like the move at the time. Could I have like completely cleared it up without Accutane whilst still using anabolics? I don't know. I would speculate no personally, but I don't really know for sure. But I've never had acne since then. So, for me, fortunately, at least the manifestation of side effects that I've dealt with are dry lips. And I mentioned that in my how I got rid of my acne permanently, my Accutane experience. Pretty old video, but it is fairly sufficiently summarizes. Well, to be honest, the summary is what I just said. Like, there's not much more to it than that. I had dry lips. That's about it. I don't know what else is going on systemically, though, that I'm not aware of. And from a liver toxicity aspect, acutely, I never really had any issues. Your dermatologist should be staying on top of that. And if you're on anabolics, do not be concurrently using oral agents on top of it. Frankly, you should not be using any AAS at all while you're on it, because even injectables can have a degree of liver stress, because ultimately everything's being metabolized by your liver. Like, even if you don't have first pass and you're skipping first pass when you're injecting a hormone, like, you are still going to metabolize drugs out of your body, and it requires a certain amount of liver function to actually accomplish this. And if you're concurrently stressing your liver with injectable agents, especially oral agents, drinking, like whatever it is, like, you are severely stressing out your liver, because it's already stressed as fuck with the Accutane. Now, again, is that overblown? Potentially in some individuals, but I mean, for some, it's a real concern. There's a reason why dermatologists take a liver baseline, or at least they should be, and then assess it, longitudinally throughout your, courses. So, anyways, Dave mentions here, and do you not think it's worth mentioning if someone with poor mental health is thinking of taking it? Mate, the suicidal thoughts is very real. Nah, man, that shit can really mess you up in the head. I had a great result with my acne dissipating, but had to drop the dose in half from the SI. Yes, I never stated sides should not be discussed. This is why you have your dermatologist explain these things before you're prescribed. Not even true. My doctor said only one person ever out of over 13 million killed themselves, so they have to put that as a side effect. I'm hoping this was discussed with you before you took it, right? Very rare, but can happen to a small percent. I don't recall having that side effect told to me, to be honest. But again, like, how many girls are prescribed fucking literal birth control at like 16 years old without having the side effects elucidated correctly? So again, any drug, you should be adequately educated before you use it. It's from gear, it's from Accutane, it's from anything. So, at the end of the day, the overarching story I think that can be drawn from this is, despite the fact that many individuals can, get away with using stuff fairly unscathed, or have some, some minimal side effects or whatever, have a bit of acne pop up and then it goes away after with no actual addressing it with other medications, you don't know if you're going to be this guy or not, and it's worthwhile to consider all of the worst case scenarios. Is that ROI worth it? Do you want that risk? Like, everything in life is a risk. I'm not saying do or don't do fucking anything. This is ultimately a personal decision, but it's just another thing to be adequately educated about and be ready to attenuate, Like, if you are going to use this stuff, understand the pharmacokinetics of your drugs, the esters. Is it going to be in and out of your system quick? How long will you be dealing with residual side effects, HPTA suppression, hormone fluctuations, and the subsequent flare-ups that could come as a result of that, which could lead to an extension of this, acne issue becoming even worse during your PCT phase? What is something you are willing to risk versus not? This is not a, saying to do anything yes or no at all. It's simply an educational tool to kind of make more informed decisions for your own personal endeavors. So anyways, a potential outcome that could happen to any of us, and it's unfortunate that it happened to him. Sorry to see it, dude, and I'm glad that you are taking a positive spin on it, though, and educating people about your experience and, the worst case scenarios. One thing I did want to add in at the end as well is just a hit list of different things that seem to be the biggest needle movers from an acne mitigation aspect, at least worthwhile to delve into, like, regardless if you are, you know, the hyper extreme outlier who basically either has to not touch the shit at all or use Accutane at like a full blown, you know, blast dosage of Accutane. There are things you can be doing to reduce your risk and attenuate the acne severity. It's just like, you know, and these will be more applicable to most people who are acne prone as opposed to people who are like hyper extreme outlier, volcano burst territory, you know, acne devastation cases. So I felt it was worthwhile touching on this hit list as well. These are just like the main things I could think of off the top of my head that I thought was worth making a list on. So, and this is for naturals too as well. Some of this stuff, just keep in mind, it's pretty obvious which one's which. But anyways, hormone selection, 19 NORs in particular, trenbolone, nandrolone on top of high dose testosterone or just a moderate dose, depending on the individual, are especially problematic seemingly for acne. What a lot of people don't realize is the layering of the progestogenic activity on top of the already present, you know, androgenic and estrogenic burden of your test base, however much it is like a 1 + 1 = 3 equation in some individuals. Like some of the worst breakouts I've seen are test plus nandrolone, test plus tren. But in general, interestingly enough, you know, back in the golden era when guys were not using test as a base at a high dosage, seemingly less acne prevalent when they were using like, I don't know, DEC only cycles, D-bol only cycles, D-bol primo. You know, again, some of that is just anecdote based on like very, very small sample size and individuals who might have just been genetic anomalies at the end of the day. But what I've seen seemingly is, in general, like at the end of the day, you should be assessing your response to singular compounds one at a time, regardless if you're doing, you know, a test only cycle to start with, whatever it is. Like you're not going to be layering, hopefully, a bunch of random shit on top, not doing D-bol kickstarts with your test and layering extra androgenic and estrogenic activity on top, leading to very difficult to manage, you know, estrogenic burden side effects and other issues from an androgenicity standpoint. Keeping in mind too, when you start to get your SHBG into like single digit crash territory, you're freeing up a ton, like any DHT that would have otherwise had a very high affinity to binding proteins to be bound up and regulated accordingly is freely circulating to wreak havoc in terms of androgenic activity. So not only are, you know, additional anabolics or high dose, you know, even high dose test on its own is going to crush your SHBG too, but any compound stacked on top is not just the inherent activity of that compound, it's also the potentiation of the testosterone effects and whatever dose you're using of that that's occurring, because there is competing for androgen receptors occurring between these compounds. There is crushing of binding proteins, which has the highest affinity to bind up and regulate androgenicity from your DHT floating around. In addition, you have competition for aromatase, you know, overlapping estrogenic activity of the multiple compounds, progestogenic activity potentially on top from the tren or the nandrolone, whatever it is. At the end of the day, you know, again, this goes back to lowest effective dose, titrating up accordingly based on needs, and lowest effective dose is like for side effect mitigation. If you were on, you know, started at 600 test off the bat of test E, you know, and you exploded in acne, would you not have been better off with, you know, a 250 to 300 entry point and maybe have used a propionate instead of an enanthate? You know, obviously a tall task to ask for certain individuals to be, you know, committing themselves to like very short esters off the bat, which has like, you know, understanding of pharmacokinetics is even more important. You can't have a lower, you know, margin of error and whatnot. But, you know, hopefully if you're pinning your fucking ass, like you should understand this stuff thoroughly enough to even realize like why that may be a more viable alternative than a long ester that you're pinning, you know, twice a week or something at a, you know, a dosage that you potentially are going to need like a 5-AR inhibitor and or an aromatase inhibitor off the bat just to manage the estrogenic and androgenic side effects of it, etc. And as well, frequency of administration brings it back, you know, the actual frequency of hormone spikes, fluctuations in them, not just from your test, but from the downstream metabolites like your estrogen, your DHT, if you're administering nandrolone or tren or primobolan, whatever it is, they all have downstream metabolites too. And the fluctuation, if you're pinning like once or twice a week or whatever, you're getting massive spikes and then dips and then massive spikes rather than steady little stable, you know, levels that are more representative of endogenous function. that is where you are going to have the least likelihood for breakouts, is stable blood serum concentration as much as you can. I almost didn't even finish the words. Concentrations. Fucking blurring my words together. In addition, avoiding toxic carrier oils. This is something I really didn't want to forget to mention this time because I have in the past, but toxic solvents, carrier oils, shitty UGLs. Like if you get dirty ass gear, even if it's like, you know, the active ingredient is present that you were trying to buy, if you are getting like really poorly made, shitty stuff from a preparation aspect, a sterility aspect, you know, so many different things that go into the quality of the end product, you can fully expect, you know, increased oxidative stress, and downstream to that, like oxidative stress seems to be one of the main mediators of acne development, and is where managing it becomes crucial. So again, this is also just like the quality of the product, not even your own genetic response to the drug itself, but also what else are you injecting into your body that could be potentially toxic. Again, above and beyond, going back to the oxidative stress too, managing that oxidative stress not only through what is going into your body, but also what is in your body from a fuel aspect. You have a high quality micronutrient dense diet and potentially supplementation on top of that. In addition, topical vitamins seem to move the needle in some capacity with certain minerals like niacinamide, vitamin that can be useful. Zinc topically seems to be useful as well. Circling back, high quality diet. You know, I really want to re-emphasize the importance of that. Like it's not just about hitting your macros, but also your micros. High quality sleep, super crucial for all things restorative and health related, including skin quality. Basic skin hygiene and bacteria removal, you know, actually like just basic taking care of your skin from a showering aspect, from a scrubbing aspect, whatever it is. UV exposure. Now this is a controversial one. I'm not necessarily, and again, none of these I'm like saying, because some of these are going to get more and more like hectic as we go down the list. This is like, you know, increasing severity of like, you know, treatment options now, because we're getting into like the natural stuff too for natural guys, not like the stuff about the pharmacokinetics, all enhanced, you know, practices, etc. But like getting down to what moves the needle for not only enhanced guys, but natural guys too, in varying, in like descending order of like least severe to like most fucking hectic. We have UV exposure, and this isn't exactly in that order, but it's a rough ballpark. But UV exposure, obviously problematic from a photo aging aspect. If you're getting excessive sun, you know, get skin cancer, you burn yourself if you're not careful. And I know a lot of guys, including myself, I used to go tanning, not just because I wanted a tan, but also because like it seemed to dry out the acne, and also it makes the acne less noticeable when you have like nice tan skin. So the drying out effect was very, very helpful actually for getting rid of my acne. And the tan skin also makes it look cosmetically more pleasing, because if you have really pale skin, you know, the red, inflamed acne spots are even more noticeable on super white, pale skin. So anyways, you know, reasonable sun exposure is honestly just a healthy practice in general. I'm not saying every time you leave the house, slather yourself in, you know, a toxic sunscreen or something. Certainly what I'm not what I'm suggesting to do either. There is a happy medium where, and again, if you're going to go the sunscreen route for, you know, photo aging purposes, like there are mineral-based sunscreens. I had a post recently about sunscreen that seemed to get a lot of, well, certain people who are like super immediately like, it's going to fucking cause cancer. It's like, as far as I'm aware, there are mineral-based ones that can be reasonable and not unhealthy. If you get a good company that is making a good mineral-based one, it seems like there are ones that are fairly safe. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. But anyways, more so about the, you know, tanning to get rid of acne. It works, but I mean, you know, to what extent and to what damage of your skin to actually get that effect. Reasonable sun exposure overall, you know, just in general, getting it out in the sun is a healthy practice, and I would highly recommend it. And some sun exposure, even though it's not going to move the needle maybe as much as like, you know, tanning a shit ton, it's still going to help in some capacity, not only for synthesis of different steroid hormones in the body and whatnot, getting your vitamin D in, and other, you know, like circadian processes and whatnot, like setting your circadian rhythm properly. Like these are all things that are very important to optimal health, which downstream will be conducive to skin health. But you get some of that, you know, like beneficial UV exposure from a skin aspect too. You know, this is a bit more anecdote than anything. So again, you know, do not take that with a grain of salt, of course, but I think reasonable sun exposure is like well accepted as like a healthy thing overall anyway. So yeah, azelaic acid and salicylic acid. This is one I am totally unfamiliar with, but seems to be a very, very common recommendation and potentially worthwhile for certain individuals, depending on, you know, acne type or whatever, but non-hormonal, you know, it's not something that's gonna like, it's not a topical anti-androgen that can bind to AR and cause like HPTA suppression or modulation of hormones. It's also not something that is going to permanently cause cell apoptosis of sebaceous glands, like a actual Accutane, which is super hectic, which we're going to get to shortly, but might be worthwhile to look at. Azaleic acid, salicylic acid, tretinoin. This is something that is seemingly good for anti-aging anyways, or other suitable retinoids, and on top of that has a good anti-acne effect. Some of my friends have oily skin and had some acne and are looking to optimize like anti-aging, you know, cosmetic, I don't know, like practices and whatnot. And it's like above and beyond like a basic moisturizer, a sunscreen if you know, depending on your interpretation of the literature, you know, a mineral one if you're going to use one and you're, you know, concerned about the chemical based ones and whatnot. Other than that, like one of the biggest needle movers seemingly in skin quality aspect is, you know, tretinoin or another suitable retinoid. That's worth looking at. Topical anti-androgen, recently Winlevi was approved. I mentioned earlier in the video, you know, the clascoterone CBO301 variant. The product name commercially, I couldn't arrive at the name. Brazula kept coming to mind. That is the topical anti-androgen still in the clinical development for androgenic alopecia, but that same active ingredient at a lower concentration is approved right now for actual acne. So that is something that might be worthwhile to look at too, and it seems to be pretty benign, at least from a like steroidal, you know, HPTA suppressive aspect. It does not seem to have like any negative feedback necessarily or go systemic to some significant degree. Topically, it seems to be well tolerated and may actually move the needle for some people, and it is, as far as I know, the first FDA approved topical anti-androgen. And don't use spironolactone, that shit's terrible. High dose vitamin B5, a very, very interesting one. If you look on YouTube, you'll see some drastic, insane before and afters, like Accutane level before and afters almost, using just straight up like over the counter vitamin B5. I believe that's pantothenic acid. And I don't know how safe that is, to be honest. Is that just, you know, you're going to urinate out the excess that you're not using? Is it going to be problematic? I imagine mega dosing any vitamin long term is not going to be the most ideal practice. But again, once you get rid of the acne, I think it's worth consulting your doctor on. Personally, if you have really bad acne, it seems to be a needle mover in a big way for certain people. That was worth mentioning in this video. And then getting to the next, the most extreme, nuclear Accutane, as mentioned in the video. And I should have mentioned, again, like anything, the minimum effective dose would be worthwhile even with Accutane if it's something you're going to explore. Now, obviously, a dermatologist are going to make your protocol, not me, so don't just fucking listen to me, obviously. But I mean, obviously, the typical recommendation, depending on who is prescribing, like may just be a full-blown cycle of it at a full dosage, even if you don't necessarily need that, just based on body weight and based on the fact that your acne hit their threshold severity level for actually prescribing it in the first place. Because again, it's not like all doctors have the same interpretation of like what makes sense from like a minimum effective dose standpoint. Like they'll give a fucking, I don't know, teenage girl like birth control, not often, but like, you know, actually pretty often I've seen people get prescribed birth control for controlling acne. Like it's fucked up. Getting put on literally a combined oral contraceptive to control your acne, like without any education in the side effect profile. Pretty absurd. But anyways, Accutane, potentially, you know, a lower barrier to entry, like microdose, may otherwise be, you know, good enough. You never know. Like the cycle I did was like a full-blown like half-year blast of like, I don't remember exactly what it was, but I think it was like 60 milligrams or something, or maybe even 80. And it definitely permanently got rid of my acne, but could I have gotten away with, you know, a lower dose? I don't know. I have no idea, to be honest. But I mean, like, I think it's certainly plausible that some people might have ended up using more drug than they needed or for longer than they needed, just based on like cookie cutter protocols. So, you know, it's worthwhile to actually explore the drug's side effect profile, risks, and weigh out the risk to reward for yourself and understand the dosage parameters if it's applicable for your body weight, your severity of acne, etc. And maybe consulting with your dermatologist on, you know, what your options are there. So anyways, that's the hit list. Hopefully that was helpful. So anyways, check out Dave Hartry on TikTok and let me know what you guys think. Holy comments help the algorithm. They're much appreciated. Like, subscribe, check out my blog. MorePlatesMoreDates.com. Follow me on Instagram at MorePlatesMoreDates, Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, TikTok, Apple Podcasts. If you want to support the channel, you can check out anything I'm associated with in the video description below, as well as my preventative medicine, hormone replacement therapy platform. Get connected with high quality doctors who will monitor your blood work, diagnostics, and make targeted recommendations for you based on that, not just from a hormone therapy perspective, because we also pride ourselves on being turnkey for naturals who are looking to optimize their biomarkers, quality of life, vitality, etc. And this is not just medications, this is natural interventions, dietary changes, lifestyle changes, sleep hygiene, etc. So that is kind of like, it's a turnkey approach to not just preventative medicine, but overall like systemic optimization ideally. And I cannot overstate the importance of having a high quality doctor, medical provider in your camp to oversee your anything, to be honest, even if you're just trying to get a baseline metric established. So down the line, if something does happen, you have that to reference and you have that information ready to go that you can then point out what happened and why things are going awry versus not, and how to address it accordingly moving forward. And anything else I'm associated with, it's all down there in the video description. Thank you guys for watching. Talk to you soon.